The democratic peace theory is the idea that democracies, in their various forms, are far less likely to go to war with one another. Proponents of this theory point out that both electoral and republican forms of democracy tend to be hesitant to engage in armed conflict with other nations identified as democracies. Different advocates have developed variations of this theory. The monadic version argues that democracies are generally more peaceful in their international relations, regardless of the other country's regime. The dyadic version focuses on the claim that democracies don't wage war against other democracies. Meanwhile, the systemic version argues that as the number of democracies in the international system grows, the overall level of peace within the system also increases. According to proponents, this tendency toward peace can be explained by a combination of norms, identities, and institutional constraints. Normatively, democratic publics tend to be wary of aggression, especially when dealing with other democracies. Democratically elected leaders also have incentives to pursue peaceful resolutions, both domestically and internationally, because their legitimacy depends on public approval. Structurally, institutions such as checks and balances, accountability, and the need for a large coalition of support make it harder for democratic leaders to justify war unless the benefits clearly outweigh the costs. These constraints, combined with the transparency of democratic politics, reduce the likelihood of miscalculation and inadvertent escalation. In a democratic state, debates in parliament, media scrutiny, expert consultation, and public discourse create credible and open signaling of intentions. The theory of audience costs further suggests that when democratic leaders issue threats, their own public can hold them accountable for backing down. This increases the credibility of such threats, making misunderstandings less likely. Although the link between peace and democracy has long been recognized, the direction of causality has been contested. The democratic peace theory maintains that democratic institutions cause peace, while the territorial peace theory argues the opposite, that peace allows democratic institutions to flourish. This second view is supported by evidence that peace tends to precede democracy, with states developing democratic institutions only after their borders are secure and stable. Additional theories claim that omitted variables like economic interdependence, alliances, or even the role of dominant global powers better explain the statistical correlation between democracy and peace. Meanwhile, early advocates of democratic peace can be traced to philosophers like Immanuel Kant and political writers like Thomas Paine. Kant, in his 1795 essay, Perpetual Peace, argued that constitutional republics were a necessary condition for long-lasting peace. Paine, in Common Sense published in 1776, asserted that the republics of Europe had generally lived in peace and that kings tended to launch wars out of pride, unlike republics. The French historian Alexis de Tocqueville likewise argued that democratic nations were less prone to aggression. Similar ideas were proposed by the philosopher Herbert Spencer. In more modern times, Dean Babst conducted the first statistical study of democratic peace in 1964, publishing it in the Wisconsin Sociologist. At the time, it received little attention. However, in the 1970s, Melvin Small and J. David Singer conducted further studies that found an absence of war between democratic nations sparking wider interest. Political scientist Michael W. Doyle added to the growing body of evidence in the 1980s, while researchers like Maoz, Abdelayli, Bremer, and Russett strengthened the theory by controlling for confounding variables. Today, the democratic peace theory is a cornerstone of international relations, although it is not universally accepted. Definitions of democracy have varied across studies, affecting results. Researchers Melvin Small and J. David Singer, both American political scientists, defined a democracy as a state that holds regular competitive elections, allows at least 10% of its adult population to vote, and has a parliament with significant power. Doyle defined liberal regimes more broadly, focusing on market economies, internal sovereignty, juridical rights, and representative government, with a relatively low threshold for suffrage. James Lee Ray, another American political scientist, required that at least half of the adult population be allowed to vote, and that a peaceful transition of executive power occur between independent parties. Meanwhile, Rudolf Rummel, an American historian, defined democracy as a competitive electoral system with a secret ballot, a wide franchise, civil liberties, and constitutional constraints. While democratic peace theory maintains that democratic states are less likely to wage war against one another, the territorial peace theory reverses the claim, arguing that peace is what allows democracy to flourish. This argument finds support in psychological and cultural theories like Christian Wells's theory of human empowerment, which proposes that security and stability foster emancipatory cultural values and democratic institutions. The regality theory, rooted in evolutionary psychology, similarly suggests that peace allows nations to evolve more democratic political structures. This line of thought is supported by historical studies showing that peace often precedes democratic developments, especially in nations with contested borders. According to the territorial peace theory, countries that remain in conflict with their neighbors struggle to build democratic institutions. Meanwhile, the democratic peace theory applies more to nations that already have peace, suggesting that shared democratic norms and institutions help sustain it. The democratic peace theory has been highly contested within international relations. It is rooted in idealist and classical liberal traditions and stands in contrast to the dominant theory of realism. Yet it has received support from leaders across party lines in the United States. In 1994, President Bill Clinton asserted that supporting democracy globally was vital for long-lasting peace. In 2004, President George W. Bush stated that democratic nations do not go to war with one another and argued for spreading democracy throughout the Middle East.
Ultimately, the best strategy to ensure our security and to build a durable peace is to support the advance of democracy elsewhere. Democracies don't attack each other. They make better trading partners and partners in diplomacy. That is why we have supported, you and I, the democratic reformers in Russia and in the other states of the former Soviet bloc. I applaud the bipartisan support this Congress provided last year for our initiatives to help Russia, Ukraine, and the other states through their epic transformations.
And the reason why I'm so strong on democracy is democracies don't go to war with each other. And the reason why is the people of most societies don't like war, and they understand what war means. And one of these days, the people of the Palestinians will realize that there is a bright future because freedom is taking hold. A future that enables their children to get educated, a future in which they can start their businesses, and a future in which they're certain that the money is going into the treasury of their government is being spent fairly in a transparent way. a future in which corruption is not the norm, a future in which rule of law prevails. And that leads to a peaceful society. I've got great faith in democracies to promote peace. And that's why I'm such a strong believer that the way forward in the Middle East, the broader Middle East, is to promote democracy.
I believe that peace is unstable where citizens are denied the right to speak freely or worship as they please, choose their own leaders, or assemble without fear. Pent-up grievances fester, and the suppression of tribal and religious identity can lead to violence. We also know that the opposite is true. Only when Europe became free did it finally find peace. America has never fought a war against a democracy, and our closest friends are governments that protect the rights of their citizens. No matter how callously defined, neither America's interests nor the world's are served by the denial of human aspirations.
European leaders have expressed similar ideas. In 1999, the EU's Chris Patten stated that free societies tend to avoid war and maintain better relations, a sentiment echoed in the European Union's security strategy and by British Prime Minister Tony Blair. An important strand within this theory is Republican liberalism, which maintains that liberal republics rarely wage war against one another. According to Michael Doyle, this is due to three main reasons. Democracies have similar political cultures, they share common moral outlooks, and their economic interdependence encourages peace. Liberalism more generally argues that diplomacy and cooperation are the best ways to maintain peace, in direct contrast to the theory of realism, which holds that conflict is inevitable due to human nature or the anarchic structure of the international system. The roots of Republican liberalism can be traced to Kant's Perpetual Peace in 1795, wherein he proposed 3 articles for achieving global peace. The first was that every state should have a republican form of government, making leaders more accountable to their people and wary of starting war. The second was that nations should unite under a federation of free states, establishing international laws and institutions to govern relations and settle disputes. The third was the establishment of a right of hospitality in which strangers entering another land would be treated peaceably, though not granted permanent residence. Kant envisioned a world where peace was sustained by democratic institutions, international laws, and mutual respect, making war an increasingly irrational option for nations. What do you think? Does the democratic peace theory hold true? Was Kant correct that we can create a world with perpetual peace? Or does our notion of realism and human history bound us to conflict? Thank you for watching.